This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
I'm going to start off just with some brief updates, just to kind of set the framework for everyone to share some of the things that are going on around the district. So you'll hear briefly from me, from our Assistant Superintendent for Administration, from Lou Limo, our Director of Student Services, Deanna Spagnola, all four of our building principals, and then Director of Student and Family Engagement, Jeff Green, at the end. So we will be very brief, a few minutes each at the most, but just to kind of give you some background to the work that's been going on around the district to help with the conversation today, and really just to make sure that the information is out there for you to hear. So I'll kick us off today. So the work that I oversee in the district is curriculum and instruction across all four of the buildings and across lots of different content areas. So what I just want to do is briefly touch upon some of the different areas that fall under the umbrella of curriculum and instruction. Most obviously, curriculum. So anything that's happening in the classroom for students, what they're looking at, what they're engaging in the classroom for their material, falls under curriculum and instruction. And as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion goes, we have a few different ways that we've been reviewing our curriculum over the years. This goes back many years, but our process has evolved over time to be more equitable and in the way that we look at the curriculum that we have in front of our students. So one of our biggest things that we do is hold curriculum institutes every summer, 3 different institutes, with about, I think last year we had close to 100 teachers participate in the institutes throughout the entire summer, and teachers have the chance to revisit the curriculum for their grade level in terms of the texts that are used, the instructional strategies that are used, the assessments that are used, and we have developed through the work with our partners at previously NYU and now Recenter, a nice curriculum guide that helps us look at each curriculum through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion. What that might look like is the type of text we're using, the authors of the books, the characters in the books, the instructional strategies that we use to engage students in the classroom. So that is all kind of a big project that happens every single summer. And not every course and grade level gets looked at every summer, but over time it's kind of a process. As far as instruction, our focus has been around creating cultures of thinking for students, and what that really means is getting more away from like what students are doing in the classroom, but rather what they're thinking about in the classroom and ways for them to engage in learning through thinking. So you'll hear a lot of classrooms talking about making thinking visible and making sure that students have opportunities to show what they're thinking, engage in conversations with all of their classmates in a different way than we have in the past. As far as assessments, at the secondary level, we've taken a good look at equitable grading practices. In particular, we're reading Grading for Equity with many of our high school departments right now, and that will continue to grow as we move into the summer. And that really means looking at how we are grading, scores we're giving kids, thinking about how to make grading more equitable for all students in terms of retakes and mastery of learning the content and not just getting a good grade. And that's been a big focus and will continue to grow. We also, in my department, we oversee professional learning and the Brighton Teacher Center, which is all of our professional learning for the district. So superintendent's conference days, we've had some focus over the years on different topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, including some speakers from Recenter to talk about implicit bias, including opportunities for people to have different choices around where they are, if I want to learn more about X, I can go to this session, and lots of book studies going on right now around the district, around diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, some led by teachers, some led by our instructional leaders, some led by our teacher center. We've also, you'll hear more about this, but the culture and climate survey that we've done, you've probably heard a little bit about it already. The Panorama survey, is we sent that out to all families last year, and I'll let our student services talk a little bit more about that. And then lastly, before we get into our HR piece, just want to touch upon partnership with St. John Fisher University that we established about 1.5 years ago at this point, or almost 2 years ago, but this is something that we're really proud of that really kind of ties into a lot of the work in all of our buildings, not just in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, but we have a partnership with St. John Fisher where it's really a 2-way partnership where we have a Future Teachers Club here at the high school that was started. This is the 2nd year that the club is going, and we have a much larger group of students in it this year, which is awesome. And the students have the opportunity to explore what it's like to be a teacher, to connect with St. John Fisher, to visit St. John Fisher, to work in French Road and Council Rock at different times, to work with our students. And our hope is to kind of grow our own teachers. Anyone can be part of the Future Teacher Club, but we encourage students of color to be part of the Future Teachers Club as well, because our hope is that they might want to go to St. John Fisher or go on to be a teacher somewhere and come back to us in Brighton and work with us here in Brighton. And on the other end of that partnership with St. John Fisher is a partnership where we take on their teachers that they currently have in their education program, who are teaching candidates of color who are interested in partnering with us in Brighton. Last year we had all 3 students that they had who were able to student teach at the time come to French Road, do their student teaching, and we've created an awesome partnership with the college where we have done professional development with the college professors and our Brighton teachers around culturally responsive education, and we've also given the chance to like really build that community within the school for the teaching candidates. So when they came back to do interviews and they finished their student teaching, we really fostered that relationship as much as we could to kind of build them up and support them through the whole process. And they interviewed here, and we hired one of the teachers here who's a 5th grade teacher at Fres right now. But this is kind of like a really big like overarching view of this program. There's a lot of different pieces of the program, but really it's intended to be like a pipeline both ways for from us here at the K-12 district level right up to the college and then hopefully back to us. So that is in a brief nutshell some of the work we've been doing in the land of curriculum and instruction. And now I'm going to pass this over to Lou Alimo.
So as Lou's coming up for his very brief 3-minute, nice and quick, gentle reminder to my colleagues, go through a quickly presentation. There's a car in the parking lot, license plate KHC 9876, a Volvo with its lights on. Just want to let you know things that we put in Lou.
Great. Good evening. My name is Lou Alimo. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Administration, and I'm representing Human Resources today. So work that I'm engaged in helping to facilitate across the district is our Hiring Practices Committee. And these next couple of slides just present our framework for our work as a Hiring Practices Committee, which consists of teachers, administrators, parent representatives. We're trying to learn best practices across industries, not just public education, but people bringing expertise and experiences and observations from, again, across industries. So we're really working in 3 pillars. And on the recruitment side, we're looking at the recruitment of teachers of color, specifically and administrators of color. And we're looking at ways that we're recruiting. We're looking at how we're presenting the district. And Dr. Marlo Washington always said, you have to be honest. You're not where you want to be. We do not have a diverse faculty. So you have to be honest with people and invite them to come help us build it. So how we market the district, how we invite people to learn more about us, invite them in, is all part of our recruitment. As part of that, we're also looking at our hiring practices from, again, how we're screening applications, how we're conducting interviews, the objectivity in which we're analyzing candidates we've been developing over the last several years. And with that, we're also looking at the environment and retention pieces. And you can see some of the goals. If going to be successful in the recruitment piece of it, we better make sure that we're ready to retain and to promote success for all of our faculty, and particularly our faculty of color. So we're looking at the environment, and we're partnering and learning from the school-based equity teams what's happening at the building level that we can learn from and develop good human resource practices to support our faculty of color. Certainly we partner with the Brighton Teacher Center to look at our professional development, and we're actively engaged in learning or developing a model with a hiring practice liaison. So somebody from human resources that can make connections with our faculty, specifically our faculty of color, to learn how can we best support them, how can we meet their needs to ensure that they feel safe, they feel welcome, and can grow here in the Brighton Central School District. Thank you.
Cover this right, Lou? Yes. Okay. All right.
Quickly, just let me show you. Sorry, I was rushing. So similar to what we pledge to our students to have a support structure. We have the same goal and objectives to support our faculty. So this is a structure that we're working through as a hiring practices, again, to make sure that our faculty feel safe, they know where to go, and how we're creating the best supports for success in the system. So these are the things that we're talking about to make sure that we have good human resource practices and supports in place, again, to ensure that retention and to make sure that we're promoting the most positive environment. Sorry about that. Thank you.
I want to rush ahead. I'm often asked, what is the Office of Student Services? In quick summary, the major buckets that we fill would be special education, nursing, and mental health. Other pieces about that, but I also like to say that student services really helps provide the support and the access to the curriculum, to the instruction for students. So some of the areas how we have been supporting this work, I participate on the Suspension Disproportionality Committee. We always are looking at our suspension data, in particular, and the impact on students of color and also students who have IEPs, students with special needs. We are continuing to look at the MTSS process. Some of you, Crystal, I'm looking at you, were a part of that work a few years ago when we were looking at our RTI process. Before we even get to the classification point, how are we in terms of looking at meeting students' needs, and how are we addressing those in an equitable fashion, meeting students where they are? And another piece is looking at our classification rate. In terms of the area of mental health, we want to look at supporting and providing resources to families and to our community, and professional development for our teachers, really through the lens of equity versus equality. Everyone is in different places in terms of understanding or comfortability around accessing mental health supports. We've also spent some time through our initiatives in the last 2 years through our blueprint, increasing supports, and most recently one of those newest pieces would be our partnership with Golisano, where we have an increased access to mental health support right within the building for the middle school and high school level student. Dr. Rio mentioned referencing the panorama data, our mental health staff and building staff looking at how are our students connecting with each other, with our staff, with our community. Do they feel a part of our community? And those were given last year, the fall, and again in the spring. So we can look at over time, how are our families, how are our students feeling connected, and what do we need to be doing differently to support them and to support those efforts. We continue to look at, again, like I said, how do we communicate that? How do we help families know what is available, whether that's within our own school district or out in the community as well. Restorative practices. We are looking again at restorative practice, and where do those lie? Is it within our social emotional learning? Is it within our culturally responsive practices? Is it within our school-based equity team? And my answer to that continues to be yes, yes, and yes. And how are we going to facilitate that work and keep that alive and well in all of those areas without duplicating efforts and making sure that those are, like I said, alive and well, to be redundant. Always looking at ways that we can strengthen our communication and collaboration with families. In particular, we were really excited in January that we were able to bring back the new family reception live and in person. We're looking again at dates and times in the school year moving forward when more families will be able to come. But that's an opportunity when our new families can come and meet not only school district personnel, but also members of our community, whether that's from town board or Brighton Rec or from the library. And I won't go through all of those names, but so people can feel more a part of our community. That was in response to data that we had collected, I'd say about 5 years ago, where our new families were feeling like Brighton is a great school district, but I don't feel like I fit in. So we're trying to make sure that we provide more opportunities for all of our families to feel welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Tappan. I'm the principal at Council Rock Primary School. So just very briefly, as you may know, we've developed school-based equity teams at each of our buildings. It's evolved throughout the years in terms of a district-based and then moving to individual school-based. So this is our first year. And we've really worked on developing the community agreements among that group to talk about how we function, and then diving into the data that the Panorama survey shared with us about staff and families. And right now we're in the throngs of creating professional development based on that, from what our staff said about what they need in terms of having difficult conversations about race, about diversity as a whole. We also analyzed and saw that we just didn't get as many families as we really wanted to. So we went back out to our families and tried creative ways to get more people engaged, to be able to get a deeper sense of where our families were feeling. And then really thinking with our youngest kids, just remember we go up through second grade, how do we engage our kids in those discussions to understand their experiences. Our counselors and teachers do social emotional work and diversity teaching are at K2 one time every 6 days, every 6-day cycle. They experience a second step lesson, which really teaches empathy, understanding similarities and differences, and we've infused lessons from Learning for Justice in that, and that is September through March. We've also worked really hard, especially at second grade, of diversification of texts to have representation. And then we've worked over the last several years of thinking of how we can do Black History celebrations a little more deeply at K2 and really looking at literature as the key to that. And this year, we're excited our librarian arranged many guest readers to come in and share the stories with our kids. So a little bit from Council Rock, and I'll turn it over to Lashara.
Good evening, everyone. I am Lashara Evans. I'm the current principal of French Road Elementary School. Our school-based equity team, we started with coming up, well, even before our community agreements, one of the big things that we worked on this summer when we met as a team is really getting to know each other and learning each other's stories. The reason why we did that is so we can have those difficult conversations when they did come up, instead of not feeling like we couldn't have a comfortable environment where we're free to speak. So after that, then we came up with our community agreements. That is agreements that we all agreed on. We used the panorama data, and we noticed that overall a sense of belonging needed to be our focus. So from that sense of belonging, we created school-wide goals related to sense of belonging. What would that look like for students? What would that look like for families? What that would look like when parents come into the building? What that would look like for staff? And then last month, and we're continuing when Dr. Rio steps on, focus on the individual sense of self-radical imagination. That means, like, what do you envision your classroom to be, that it will be welcoming to every student that comes in? And if you're not a classroom teacher, if you're office staff, if you're a family member, what does that look like? Your radical imagination where everyone can feel valued and welcome, what would that look like deeply? We have talked about instances of racist language because there's been incidents where our students of color are using it with the A at the end with each other. So we're educating students on that word and what it means and why we're not going to say it in school, and what it could mean if it was changed to with the ER at the end. Other equity work updates. We have our multicultural club, which is a new club this year. It meets in the morning, which is different. All of our clubs are in the afternoon, but the reason why it's in the morning is because we want access. We know that many of our students that would want to be in a multicultural club, they wouldn't have transportation in the afternoon. By having it in the morning, they have the early bus, and they're already at school and they're there. There's about 60 kids in that club, and it represents so many different languages, so many different backgrounds. Our Hispanic and Black History Month celebrations have been awesome. We're rounding our Black History Month celebration with our school-wide celebration tomorrow. If you don't know the story of Lulu Griffin, Westbrook Griffin, she's a civil rights icon. There's a documentary about her. She's actually the mother of Harvey, who's at the high school, and Henry. Everybody loves Henry, our security. She's actually the mother. She's coming to tell her story tomorrow for the school-wide. But we also had individual assemblies for 3rd and 4th grade. We had an assembly, and then we had Herb Smith from the RPO come today for our 5th graders. And then on Friday, we're really gonna show out with Crystal and Tamika leading our arts and experience celebration, where they're gonna do a presentation and then make something that they can take home. That's now, I know you may have high school students. This is for our babies, K-5, Council Rock, and Frez. So I think we showed out a little bit with our Black History Month. Second step lessons. We updated our lessons with collaboration with the Anti-Racist Project. Keisha James, we worked with her this summer. She came over and she said, how can you use me? And we said, we want you to look at our lessons, because our lessons are taught by all white women in our mental health team. And to have that perspective of someone else, we really needed that lens. So Keisha has been working to update the lessons. And then school discipline. We've been very intentional about how we discipline our students so that it is consistent across all backgrounds. So that's been like my own personal professional development around the school, making sure that every student is disciplined in the same way, that it's not based on, oh, this kid, seems this way that everybody's being disciplined the same way. So that's just a little bit of our updates. And I think I stayed under my 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Danielle Edmonds. I'm the principal at 12 Corners Middle School. And like the other buildings, we have been working with our school-based equity team all year. We started off like Front Road and actually have continued through much of the year working on establishing community agreements, not just for our school-based equity team, but agreements that will be the basis for all the work that we do throughout the building, both as adult groups, but also student groups as well. So we've really tried to be intentional in revisiting and revising to make sure that everybody's voice is included in the agreements that we come up with. Our focus on with the panorama data was around sense of belonging and school culture. We looked at both of those from the student perspective. And so what we have been doing through much of this year is trying to figure out what the best way is to get student input on these two questions. What does it mean to be safe at school? What do safe spaces look like in our school? And so we have an activity that we're going to finish creating at our next meeting, which is next week, and then it'll be ready to launch to get some really good feedback, solid feedback from our middle schoolers, so then we have some specific action items. We've been working with Monroe and BOCES also, and they are going to be doing some trainings for our TCMS Strong students. Our TCMS Strong leaders are 8th graders who are leaders in our school. They're peer leaders, and they're going to do work around facilitating difficult conversations with peers, both in like a peer mediation mindset, but also in larger group settings where they're working with peers and just talking about controversial topics. In terms of racist language, we approach each case in a discrete manner. So we're looking at first providing students with multiple avenues through which to share their experiences. So if students are experiencing derogatory language in school, they have our Safe Schools hotline, they have adults, they have the counseling, and we work with students so that they know what their outlets are in terms of sharing that information. And again, based on the use of the word, we follow up with restorative conversations, with education, with parental collaboration. And we've also been working with our staff over the last few faculty meetings to look at different protocols for dealing with situations where students might be using unkind language with each other, and then continuing to establish safe spaces for conversations. We have been working through SEL lessons this year. That is one of the things that came out of our Panorama survey results that we started looking at in the summer, was that in terms of building connectedness and well-being, we needed to create spaces for students to do this. So this year, for the first time, we have a 10-minute homeroom in the morning, and we have a 30-minute win period at the end of the day. Students start their day and end their day with the same teacher and the same group of 11 peers. And that's very intentional, so that each Friday when they do their SEL lessons, they're around people that they have built a sense of community with. We started the first half of the year with simply just focusing on community building and getting to know each other. The second half of the year, we've been working through lessons with more of a social justice lens. One of the things that we also did, we're working with Jeff on the disproportionality committee, but our admin team started in June of last year with a book study around alternatives to suspension. So we've been having really great conversations as colleagues this year and continuing to push each other. Okay, we're not going to suspend this kid. What are other things that we can do? What are our other options? Where does education come in? How are we helping students to learn and to repair from what they're doing? So I think we've grown tremendously in a short time. We still have a long way to go, but that has been really insightful and helpful. And then something that we're super proud of at the school is just our idea of clubs and activities. We have more than 30 clubs at the middle school, which I challenge you probably to find middle schools that have more clubs than that. And we have Black Student Union, Mosaic Club, GSA. At the end of last year, we added the Muslim Student Union. This year we started the American Sign Language Club. We have a service club. So basically our students know, and that's a challenge that Mr. Green and I gave all of the 5th graders last year. If we don't have it, let's create it, because we're gonna find a space for everybody to feel connected and be a part of something. So we continue to add on clubs, and we have 2 club fairs a year, so students know what's out there and what they can participate in. Each of our clubs works through our Culture and Climate Committee to kind of sponsor a celebration month throughout the year. I talked about multiple opportunities, tons of artwork throughout the building around not only the specific groups, but also the celebrations throughout the year. And then those students, we pull students from clubs to represent on our committees. That's not something that we've had at TCMS prior to this year. We have students on our Principal Advisory Committee, we have students on our Culture and Climate Committee, we have students on our School-Based Equity Team Committee. So really working to give students an opportunity to share their voice and kind of let us support them in what they need.
Excuse me, Tom Hall, the high school principal. We have a mission statement that we try to wrap around everything that we do back to that statement and creating a safe, welcoming environment for every kid and every staff member. In terms of addressing racist language at the high school, our motto, if you see something, say something. It's not just with, threats or concerns, it's with the language as well, and addressing it immediately and appropriately, and depending on the nature of the incident, learning the context. We found that it's been a huge plus for us to use it as an educational and teachable moment. But also, there may be consequences, of course, depending on the context, but it always is an opportunity to learn and learn from each other and learn from other kids in terms of the context of that language. And there's a variety of general statements that we give, whether it's a PA announcement, emails, parents square to students, but having those conversations in a variety of during our day and throughout the year. Our Culture Climate Leadership Team, similar to the middle school, is made up of a very diverse group of students from various backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, cultures. And these students come together at least once a month. We review data. We talk about what's working at the high school, what's not. We review the survey data that we take. And they help put together a basic packet that we outline at the start of the year, in the middle of the year, and throughout the year in our counseling seminars about appropriate, inappropriate behavior, and then calling out specific things when it comes to harassment or sexual harassment, derogatory language, or behaviors. Our school-based equity team as well, looking at student climate data from last spring. We decided after looking through that data for a good portion of the fall, just like the middle school, sense of belonging for a lot of students seemed to be lacking in terms of the higher percentage of students who are feeling like they belong at Brighton High School. So we're diving into that. We're going to be asking students to talk about 2 situations. One, where you felt very connected to a staff member, or a situation at school where you felt connected to the school. Tell us about that. What were the parameters behind that? So we can learn from those scenarios, share that with staff, and go from there. And also, when you didn't feel connected to the high school or staff, or connected to somebody in the building, and what was happening at the time, where was that happening, and how we can best learn from that so we can hopefully change potential parameters for the future. Our English department has done a ton of work in addressing a variety of issues around race and sexuality, and all the various things that are happening right now when it comes to trying to have authors represented in the classroom, that authors from backgrounds that look and sound like people who are sitting in our classrooms, and not just the traditional books that we've all read. Our English department came up with a policy about the N-word and what happens when that's found in a text in the classroom, with experts that we use from around the field in Rochester. To Kill a Mockingbird, which I know a lot of you have read in high school. Now we've really taken a different lens to kind of look at it from white privilege, bias, racism, things that weren't necessarily always discussed in texts like that. Our social studies department has adopted a countywide unit on redlining, which is now being taught in all of our U.S. history classes, and a lot of that history right here in Brighton. And then we're currently investigating the AP African American Studies course, which you may have heard a little bit about in the news recently, but we are really seriously looking to adopt that in the next couple of years. No, Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Green. I'm the Director of Student and Family Engagement. I asked to go last because I'm really involved in a lot of things in the district. Many of the items that have already been discussed, so I'm going to not be redundant. I'm involved in many of the committees, and it's an honor and privilege to be able to be a part of it, to be able to give my personal perspective, and also to be able to share the perspectives of students and families that I work with every day. I'll go down to the Suspension Disproportionality Committee. That is a committee that I'm leading. I know that we've heard about it a couple of times. The team is really working hard to look at there's a lot of data that we have to look at. We're looking at 10 years worth of suspension data, various subgroups. Obviously, we're looking at race, but we're also looking at social disability and socioeconomic status. And it's a work in progress, but I know that the team's really working hard, and we're going to continue to keep diving into that. I also am a part, along with Dr. Rio, with the Regional Equity Network, and what that is basically many of our local districts have come together to share ideas and experiences and learn from each other about different initiatives that they started having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's just a way to share ideas, to share experiences, to share challenges together, and to grow together, not just here in Brighton, but also as a local, global Rochester, Monroe County community, along with BCSD as well. Many people here, I'm very proud of our inaugural Urban Suburban Family Social. I know Ms. Spagnola had mentioned the idea that we want to bring families in, and as many of us know, the families that are part of the program, all of them, they don't physically live or reside in the district, and sometimes there could be a disconnect. And I am the parent liaison for Urban Suburban, and we really just want to have an opportunity for them to connect with each other, because we have many families that come in different cohorts at different years, and they have a chance to meet the people that they come in with, but not always with each other. And a lot of times there's a lot of similar experiences, challenges, and even successes, and we want to continue to build community and networking for them so they can continue to grow together and support each other, and also help us grow as a community as well. So this isn't really talked about that much, but we have several families that are part of our community that are considered homeless or experiencing challenging times, and I'm also the Kinney Vento liaison for the district. There's a lot of things that I do along with the building leaders, along with other community members, to always look at providing access to different things, whether it's transportation, whether it's taking students and or families to the local, the Brighton Your Wardrobe or the food cupboard. The community here in Brighton does a really good job of supporting the families, and that's some of the work that I do is working with them. And we always want to be discreet because we don't want to put people's business out there. But there are a lot of families that and students that struggle, and that's some of the work that I do oftentimes. I already talked about the urban suburban families, but I can definitely say that one of the things we're trying to do is meeting with the families, meeting with the students. I did that myself and all the building principals. Every single family and student we checked in with, we're going to be doing more check-ins to see what we can do to better support them. And next, I have the Historically Black Colleges and Universities trip. We're super excited about it. Dr. Hall and I met with the students that are going. We're taking 21 students to 3 historically black colleges. Specifically, we are taking African American students. There's no cost. There's a lot of people in this room that have been very supportive of giving grant monies to support this. It's a partnership that we're doing. It's the first time we're doing this, connected with other districts around Monroe County, to give some of our African American students access to colleges and some experiences they may not have had, because most of the colleges, historically black colleges, are located in the southeastern part of our country. So we're really excited about that. The students are very excited, and really looking forward to that. And then last but not least, as I said, I'm involved in a lot of different groups of kids, a lot of different situations, and I work with the teams on helping to facilitate restorative conversations. This year I've had multiple conversations around derogatory language, but it's not just about that. It's about conflict resolution, and it's a team effort. So, I'm as a parent liaison, my door is always open to anybody. I got to put that out there. Some of you have had the opportunity to work with, but just looking forward to continue to be a part of the community and continue to make it the best it can be. So I will now turn it over to Dr. McGowan. Or,
Did you want to say anything else? Thank you.
Coming up right now, so.
Much appreciated. So first, I just want to thank each of the administrators for doing that. The point was, and I will be very brief, because we did not want to be talking the room, into a lull or into sleep or to dominate the conversation. The point was to level set and to be able to share with you, here's what is happening, We recognize that many people in the room have been on the journey with us at different points or are newer to the journey with us, and just having an understanding of what is happening right now is sometimes helpful in the conversation. That's not to say that the presentations were intended to say, hey, look, we did all this, we're all set. Like, we're ready to move on. That's not at all the case. The case is really just to say to you, here's where we are right now, but in our system and the way we plan going into future years, we really would like to have an understanding from the community, where are we from your perspective, and what should we be thinking about as we plan going into next year? So as we are thinking about our strategic plan, our blueprint plan, and it happens towards the end of the school year, we start wrapping up now, it's aligned to our budget process. We need feedback in terms of where are we on the journey from your perspective? What are your experiences relative to the DEI work? Either individual experiences you care to share, or just your experience in the space of DEI with us. In other words, not an acute moment, but in general, your impression of where we are and what we should be thinking about. And then that second question, which is key, what are your suggestions for us? That also doesn't mean that we wait then until next year, right? So there might be suggestions that come from tonight and feedback from you tonight that are acute, in the moment. Next week we ought to be doing that or thinking about this. But the general way that we plan, as you can see, those site-based equity teams are a great example, and all the work that was just detailed. That's an exceptional amount of work. That's a big work plan in the course of a year. That's developed end of the year, into the summer, goes into the year. So organizationally, the effort is aligned and focused on getting those things done during the year, and we're held accountable to them. We say we'll do them, we measure them, we report on them, and that's the work for the year. We don't want to necessarily turn on the dime tonight, but we need your feedback to know where we're heading, where we ought to be going, and what your suggestions might be. A couple of the considerations we'd like you to be thinking about in this conversation, just almost rules of the road, so to speak. First, that nobody should feel obligated to share in any way. If you're not comfortable sharing your story or experience is painful, traumatizing in any way, please feel comfortable passing at the table. So when the question comes around to you, you don't have to share. I want to make sure we're very clear in that. That leads to the second, which it's nobody's job to prove that a situation is painful or has caused harm. It's nobody's job to have to illustrate harm, establish a case for that, prove it, so to speak, that, you know, I've been harmed in this moment, and have to tell a painful story to do that. We're not asking you to do that. We're recognizing that pain is caused each and every day. We're recognizing that this continues to be and will continue to be a journey for us to be on. We're not asking you to prove that. We're asking you to give us feedback in terms of where you might be in that and what we might want to be thinking about going forward. I think it's important to point out that what is said at the table stays at the table. So the expectation and the trust from everybody in the room tonight should be that whatever you do care to share, that stays here, that we're not repeating people's stories when we walk outside of the room. That those are very personal to some people and it shouldn't be repeated. When the notes are summarized from tonight, when the experience is summarized, it will be done in a general manner. And when those notes are shared back out by email, there won't be specifics or personally identifying details for people either. So when you see that in the notes, it's not meant to be sanitized in a way that we're not acknowledging a particular story or experience, but we want to protect also the personal experience that people have. Our goal is to listen far more than speak. I'm not demonstrating that at the moment, I realize that. The district representatives at the table, both the administrators and the board members, are really trying to gather feedback from you. They're happy to answer a question, they're happy to dig into a topic with you. But if you sense at the outset that the approach is to listen more than speak, that's intentional. Because we really would like to take advantage of the opportunity to hear from you. So, where a story is shared or there's a particular circumstance, and everybody at the table is thinking, well, how can the administrator just let that moment pass without explaining that? Recognize that that's intentional because it diminishes somebody's own experience to necessarily clarify something or to dig into a story and say, well, I don't think that's actually what happened. Again, you don't have to prove it. We're taking all that at face value. I just want everybody at the table to realize why somebody might not be responding is because their focus tonight is on listening. Excuse me. Please allow time for participants to all have the opportunity, recognize the limited time. So as you're sharing feedback, just think about the people in your group and the fact we want to get around the table twice. Once with people sharing where they're at in terms of the DI work in the district and what they'd like to share. And the second, again, what your suggestions are. The group has, again, at least one administrator and a board member with them. They may take notes, but they may also ask somebody at the group to take notes, because at 8:15, we're going to ask that each group report out and just basically summarize in a general way. These are some suggestions that came up, and this is a general assessment of where people at our table felt that they were at in the journey. These 2 questions will stay up on the screen. These are the 2 questions that are going to be asked at the table. And feel free to share as you wish what is most comfortable for you and what you would like to share as well. Sometimes there's things that people want to share that are not part of the question. That is fine. This is your opportunity to interact and share. The question sometimes assumes that we know what people want to share. That may not always be the case. So feel free to respond the way you like to respond. Any questions? Thanks very much for coming. We'll talk to you at 8:15.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.